Imagine this, not a puff of smoke rising into the morning sky, not the scent of burning wood laced with betrayal, but silence. A tense, impossible silence as the crowd gathered in ruin holds its breath. And then, chaos. A shadowy figure cuts through the guards. Chains fall. A cloaked horse bolts through the city gates. The flames never touch her. Joan of Arc, the peasant girl turned divine commander, escapes the pyre not as a broken fugitive, but as a reborn symbol. She doesn't vanish into legend. She lives, and with that breath of life, history itself exhales a different future. No longer just the Maid of Orleans, she evolves. The fire meant to consume her becomes the crucible that hardens her resolve. She emerges not as a saint etched in stained glass, but as something far more dangerous to the powers that be, a survivor. A strategist. A revolutionary voice wrapped in armor and conviction. Imagine a France not haunted by Joan's ghost, but led by her steady hand. The same woman who rallied exhausted soldiers under sacred visions now moves among the people with a new vision, of unity, of justice, of power redefined. She does not ask for a crown, France offers it. And with that gesture, everything changes. This is not the France of fragile monarchs and corrupt regents. This is the France of a living legend, where myth walks among men, and the woman they once tried to silence becomes the voice that reshapes a nation. What kind of world unfolds when Joan of Arc does not burn, but builds? Welcome, curious minds, to Twisted Timelines, your portal to a world where history bends, twists, and spirals into the unknown. Here, we don't change the past for the sake of fantasy, we explore it. We dig deep beneath the surface of accepted narratives to uncover the rich soil of possibility, the hidden branches of timelines that could have been. And today, we're plunging into one of the most evocative, what ifs, ever to emerge from the smoldering ashes of the Middle Ages. What if Joan of Arc had survived her execution in 1431? Picture the weight of that moment, the crackling flames, the crowd, the injustice. But instead of ending in martyrdom, history takes a sharp left turn. Joan doesn't die. She lives. And in doing so, she alters the course of not just France, but the very arc of European power, gender roles, and revolutionary thought. Gone is the narrative of sainthood carved in retrospect by church and crown. Instead, we imagine a flesh and blood woman who re-enters the world not as a symbol, but as a force. A warrior hardened by betrayal, but undeterred. A peasant girl turned general who doesn't become a holy relic, but a living revolutionary. Not just a heroine remembered in stories, but a leader who forges policy, inspires movements, and shakes the political foundations of kingdoms. This isn't just an alternate military campaign. This is a reimagining of courage as power, of spiritual vision as political clarity, of early feminism before the term even existed. Joan's survival could ripple through centuries, sparking uprisings, changing succession lines, redefining what it means to lead. So as we open this alternate chapter in time, remember, this story isn't about what was. It's about what could have been, and what that means for how we understand strength, sacrifice, and the untold power of one woman's survival. Let's flip the page of history, and rewrite the script from the moment everything was meant to end. It's May 30th, 1431. The air is thick with smoke, prayers, and fear. The young woman in chains walks toward her execution site, Joan of Arc, only 19, about to be consumed by the fire of political revenge and ecclesiastical cowardice. But just as the crowd readies for the spectacle, something unthinkable happens. Shouts erupt. Swords clash. Hooded figures descend like ghosts out of the mist. Whether it's a well-planned operation by loyalists, a last-minute bribe orchestrated by sympathizers in the court, or a secret exchange sanctioned by those who realized too late that burning her would only immortalize her cause, Joan is pulled from the brink of death. She vanishes into the shadows of Europe. Rumors swirl. Some say she died anyway. Others say she escaped to a convent, or fled to a distant land. But the truth? She's not hiding. She's waiting. Transforming. Watching the kingdom fracture under weak kings and foreign hands. Watching the people suffer, while the elites play their endless games of power. And then, just as France teeters, she returns. But this is not the girl who once heard voices and pleaded with Charles VII. This Joan is sharper, harder. A woman forged not in visions, but in betrayal. She returns not to ask for permission to lead, but to rally the broken, the poor, the forgotten. She rides not just with a sword, but with a message. She allies with peasant revolts sweeping across the countryside, farmers, artisans, and women who've known nothing but war and hunger. She speaks in the language of justice, of faith redefined, of a France that belongs to its people, not its crowns. And suddenly, she's not just a general. She's a movement. She inspires the earliest whispers of democracy in feudal Europe, gathering assemblies of commoners, advocating for land reforms, preaching unity between regions long divided. She pushes back not just against the English invaders, but against the very foundation of aristocratic privilege and inherited power. The nobility fears her. The church can't silence her. And the people. They adore her, not as a relic of war, but as a living hope. In this timeline, Joan of Arc doesn't become a footnote of medieval tragedy. She becomes the first spark of a revolution long before 1789. A voice for the voiceless. A prophecy fulfilled, not by sainthood, but by action. Imagine this. Not a France torn by centuries of internal strife and class division, but a France unified under a single banner of reform and resilience, and doing so centuries before history intended. In this twisted timeline, Joan's survival doesn't just save a life, it accelerates a nation's destiny. Instead of splintered kingdoms and competing feudal lords, France rallies behind a leader who speaks not from a throne, but from the battlefield, from the village square, from the soul of the common folk. Under Joan's vision, we don't just see victory in war, we see transformation in governance. Now, consider the ripple effect. A woman, not a queen by birth, but by action and merit, ruling, leading, legislating. Long before Elizabeth I holds court in England, long before Catherine the Great ascends in Russia, France has Joan, a warrior stateswoman laying down the blueprint for female leadership in a world that barely imagines it possible. But it doesn't stop there. What if Joan, with her mix of divine mystique and populist power, began advocating not for divine right monarchy, but for a constitutional one? Imagine her building a council of representatives, peasants, artisans, merchants. Long before the idea of a parliament takes root across the continent. She wouldn't just wield power, she would share it, codify it, and inspire others to demand it. Could her voice have carried beyond the borders of France? Into the hearts of the oppressed in Burgundy, the serfs in the Holy Roman Empire, the restless towns of Italy and Spain? Could her movement have ignited a continental wave, a pre-Enlightenment awakening, where monarchs were questioned, the people heard, and the future rewritten? Joan of Arc, not a saint remembered for her sacrifice, but a living myth who rewrote history in ink and action, not blood alone. In this alternate path, she becomes more than a heroine. She becomes a symbol of possibility for an entire continent still asleep in the arms of kings. But now, let's step out of the shadows of speculation and ask the real question. What do you think? Would a surviving Joan of Arc have become too powerful, too independent, too revolutionary? For the fragile egos of kings and clergy. Would the very forces that once burned her as a heretic now fear her as a populist threat, a disruptor of the old world order? Or, could France have risen to the occasion? Could a nation broken by war and divided by class have rallied behind this unrelenting force of nature, a woman who defied gender, destiny, and death itself? Could Joan have worn not just armor, but a crown, and reshaped its meaning. Would history embrace her? Or betray her again? We want to know what your timeline looks like. Would Joan become a queen? A revolutionary icon? Or be exiled by the very people she saved? Drop your theories in the comments below. We love seeing how you twist the timelines. And if reimagining the past gets your heart racing and your brain buzzing, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell icon, so you never miss a journey into the what could have been. This is Twisted Timelines, where history isn't just studied, it's rewritten. With us through another twisted timeline. As we close the chapter on this reimagined Joan, we ask you to keep questioning, keep imagining, and remember, history is not some ancient script carved in stone. It is a living, breathing narrative written by those who dare to rewrite it. Until next time, dream boldly, challenge the past, and never forget, the future is always waiting to be shaped. Subscribe now to Twisted Timelines, where every what if is just the beginning.